Hello and welcome. This is me, Zelalem Ibeltal, producer of the weekly edition ATV Special. The upcoming 2021 Ethiopian Parliamentary Election is becoming the agenda of many Ethiopians. People often talk about which party will win the election, who is gonna be the next Prime Minister of Ethiopia, what sort of administration we're gonna have after the election. There are some confusions, doubts, fears, and hopes regarding the upcoming election, but there are some factors which we should know. The first very fact is the upcoming parliamentary election is scheduled for June 5, 2021. The second and the most important fact is, though Ethiopia has conducted so many elections, still the country has poor culture of democratic and fair election. Therefore, the upcoming election, the 6th Ethiopian parliamentary election, is not expected to be absolutely democratic and fair. This is a bitter fact which we should be aware of. But this doesn't mean that the 6th Ethiopian parliamentary election is not valuable, is not expected. Rather, the 6th Ethiopian parliamentary election is so vital and much expected, anticipated parliamentary election. There are some scenarios, there are some factors which makes us hopeful about the upcoming Ethiopian parliamentary election. And the most important of all is that cruel organization which abused the previous 5 parliamentary election, TPLF, is not in power. In fact, TPLF is cancelled by the Electoral Board of Ethiopia. In fact, TPLF is the most tricky organization which abused the past 5 previous elections. The game with TPLF is over, but TPLF is not the whole thing. There are so many problems that hinders democratic, fair, free election. Dear viewers, to share you important sites, ideas, and recommendations about the upcoming 2021 Ethiopian parliamentary election, I am joined by PhD student of political science. Please do stay with us. Mulunesh Desse, PhD student of political science at the University of Bahar Dar. Warm welcome to Amhara TV studio.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time and dedication indeed.
No.
Okay. Many people believe that the upcoming election will bring an end to Ethiopian major problems like ethnic tensions, undemocratic rule, and so forth. So do you think that the upcoming election will solve Ethiopian age-old problems?
Okay, thank you. When you are talking about election by it means is one attribute of democracy, one attribute.
Yeah.
If we are expecting to solve such problems, democracy must prevail in the state. If we need democracy, citizens should participate. There must be equality, freedom, liberty, multi-party system, free and democratic election. And peoples and political parties by themselves should accept the end result of election. If they accept that democratic election is processed in a democratic manner, they should accept.
Yeah.
So the election is one attribute of democracy, but it is not the last and the end. It will contribute. It will be a cornerstone, but not the end result. To have to solve such kind of tensions. So, to solve such kind of tensions, disagreements, problems of Ethiopia, full democracy must sustain. For democracy, election is one part, and people will, if there is democratic election, people will trust the government. If they trust the government, there will be positive interaction, communication within the government and the people. To do that, media should be free. We should have whatever press media, whatever private electronic medias, whatever private medias, public medias, they should be free to show or to clearly give information for the public. So democracy is election is one attribute, but not the end and the last. So it will contribute a cornerstone. It will contribute a very huge issue for the next democratic systems and to solve such kind of tensions. You must know what does mean by democracy. When you say democracy in a given state, democracy is a system of a government whose power was, or the sovereign power was held by, or rest on the sovereign. The sovereign should be the governed. The governed means peoples of the given state. If the sovereign are the governed or peoples of the given state, they become the last decision makers. Last decision makers, vital decision makers, fundamental decision makers will be citizens of the given state. If people are so, then they will have their own way of expressing their sovereignty in decision making on the way how the government or who makes decisions and who leads the given state for a given period of time will be decided by the people. In this way, people's sovereignty, sovereign power, will be changed into cities or restricted peoples through democratic election. When it comes to election, election doesn't mean by democratic election. Almost all democratic states or democracies have elections, but all elections are not democratic. Okay. In this sense, when we are talking about election, on the behalf of democratic election, we will be saying that elections by itself is a way in which someone elects or gives his vote or her vote to decide who will lead the given state or who will be representative of the given state. When I am talking about election and representation, democracy will be exercised directly or indirectly. Almost all states in the world today exercise democracy indirectly. So if democracy was exercised indirectly in the given state, it is must to have election in a democratic manner. So an election which is periodic, which is competitive, which is fair, which is free, which gives equal time or equal opportunity for all, with an adult suffrage, universal suffrage will be taken as a democratic election. So when it comes to Ethiopian issues, election was exercised or started during the imperial period even. Exactly. Chamber of Deputies were elected from the people, but it's not democratic. Even within the Derg period, which is a single party system, WP, Workers' Party of Ethiopia, there is election, the candidates are only from the single party, and the simple nominal election was done, even though the constitution was the first organized by referendum, even though it gives some room for the people to know what does mean by constitution, what kind of constitution and so on, but they are not sovereign power holders.
Even after Derg, there have been 5 parliamentary elections.
I will come. In the PRDF period, a big Gangat party, which is led by TPLF dominant, as we know, all the world, throughout the world, it is obvious, PRDF was led by TPLF, and we have 5 elections in the PRDF period. But these 5 elections, consecutive elections, periodic elections, it is obvious, it is periodic. These elections doesn't mean by democratic elections. Rather, at the end of the day, the result of these elections was creating a very huge dominant party. That is TPLF lead, PRDF, which leads the party to control all aspects throughout the state. All corridors, economic, political, and other powers were handled by that single party, especially within the TPLF. This doesn't mean by election. So, the upcoming elections, the 6th Ethiopian election was expected by majority, including me as a citizen. It will be a turning point or a starting point to have democratic election. Because more or less, even though there are natural and man-made challenges are facing Ethiopia as a state, as you know, there is a COVID issues, there are some conflicts which are results of TPLF, ethnic conflicts, ethnic tensions. We have nearly thousands of internally displaced peoples. There is starvation because of flood and because of different disasters. This will have their own effect. But when you see the starting point or progresses from the government side and including the National Electoral Board of Ethiopia, there are some better issues which will be opening rooms for the next days or for the next elections.
If election can't give a solution to Ethiopian major problems, so what will be the significance of the upcoming election? I mean, which kind of problems will be addressed by the upcoming election, do you think?
As I mentioned, election is not the last and the end. It is one side, one expression of a way. For that matter, each and every section of the society has its own responsibility. For example, let us take political parties, whatever winning party or opposition parties, they must be democratic by themselves. Democracy should start from personal individuals. So each and every individuals plus political parties as a group and the society at large should think over and should clearly understand what will be my right and what will be my responsibility to do that. And political parties by themselves, for example, if they have got a chair or seat in the parliament, even though whatever they win, whatever any party, we don't know who will, the result will be done by the election. So it is expected to be one party will win the election and will organize the government. And we expect also we will have some political parties, opposition parties, who have seats in the parliament. Those political parties should stand clearly for the sake of the people. So democratic elections, if there is democracy, are a fight for, must not be a fight for survival. Rather, it must be a competition to serve. Most of the time, in Ethiopia, in Africa, people stand for election and want to hold a government power and fight for survival, but it is not right. So, democratic election and those who stand for election should compete to serve the public or the large society. If so, all things will be solved. There will be check and balance, there will be transparency, accountability, free media, citizens actively participate, they become real ownerships of the state, and they will have real decision makers and positive interaction between the people horizontally and vertically, and media will freely communicate the public with the government, they will serve as a channel and so on. So solutions will come at the end of the day.
So what is expected from the upcoming election? What will be the specific significance of this election? Do you think it will lay a fertile ground for the future democratization process in the country?
It will be difficult, but as a citizen and as a scholar, I expect that the next upcoming, the sixth election, an election, will be the initial election, a starting point of we as Ethiopians to have democratic election for the future and to start and exercising democracy in the state. As I mentioned, we more or less expect that National Electoral Board of Ethiopia become free from government influence. It is the starting point is showing us that. Yeah. And we have a number of political parties, even though they have their own deficits or some weaknesses. Yeah. And rumors shows that it is not the last, it is not absolute, it will not, we don't expect that the next election will be absolutely democratic election. As I mentioned, there are some natural and man-made problems. We have no such strong political culture, democratic culture in the state. And most of the time, most political parties are organized to liberate their own ethnic group or religious groups or some corridors, or some groups of... Even we have a small number of political parties who stands for unity, oneness, peace, security, and development as a large society or the state of Ethiopia. Rather, they try to liberate Amharas or try to liberate Afars, Somalis, and so on. Yeah. They are more or less, they are still organized in the ethnic-based organizations. Yeah. Such kind of disintegrations will not result absolute election in the given state. At the end of the day, they will have some sort of dissatisfaction. Yeah. They will have some sort of disagreements on the results of election too. So that we must have strong political parties, especially working for unity, oneness, peace, security, and development of the state. And we must have free exercising of the issue. But at the very beginning, the next election was expected to be a very good example, initial point, opening room for the next democratic elections. And I expect that it will result more or less trustful results for the peoples of Ethiopia.
Yeah, at least it will open the space for the future democratic election.
Yeah, my expectation is that.
Yeah. Do you think there is enabling environment to conduct a democratic, free and fair election?
more or less better enabling environment is there, more or less. It is not absolute as I mentioned, but it is a way. When you see, as I mentioned previously, when you see, for example, let us take National Electoral Board of Ethiopia announces officially within online to select those trainers or each to the ground, from the top to the ground. It is one expression of democratic election. And when you come to discussions within political parties, what electoral board was working on are a very good example is we will have better elections, democratic elections for the future. But it will not be absolute, as I mentioned. It will be a turning point or opening room for the next. And there are so many challenges and opportunities. A number of challenges, and at the same time, if we use those challenges as opportunity, if we are active enough, if we are systematic, we as Ethiopians, whatever political parties or any parts of the society, if we take these challenges as opportunity, we will have more or less better election.
Okay. In countries like Ethiopia, where the culture of democratic election is low, election by itself brings kind of problems. Pre-election period, during election, and post-election period, some problems, some chaos are expected. What kind of problems do you expect in Ethiopia?
In pre-election period, what we are seeing is, let us take also political parties. Most of the time we are focusing on political parties. Our political parties, as you know, there are a number of parties which are banned to be candidates in the election because they can't fulfill criteria. Even we don't know what policies and strategies they have. To have a very matured election, political parties should clearly plan their own policies and strategies. They should initiate people to support them. They must have debates between them. There must be a debate between political parties to convince people to get seats in the parliament. Still now we don't know whose policies are there. What are policy and strategies of those political parties who are upcoming candidates for that matter? We don't know their policies. We don't know some sorts. They are facing challenge to fulfill criteria which are done or agreed by their council and by the lead of electoral board. So before election, I see some gaps from political parties. More or less, we will have some clues about the Prosperity Party, because more or less their policies will be emanated from the book of the Prime Minister, Madamar.
Yeah.
We will expect what kind of policy and strategies will coming in the future. But we don't know what policy and strategies they have. They must have.
People elect their candidates based on the information they have. And the single most important instrument to disseminate information about the candidate, about the parties, are the media.
Yeah.
So my question is, are the media, for example, are the Ethiopian state media giving equal opportunity for those opposing parties?
Yes, it is. To have real neutral media who serves equally those whatever opposition party, whatever the public, any area.
Yeah.
We must exercise democracy. As we have no democracy, nobody expects media will be free.
Okay.
It is a starting point. They must start. They must go step by step towards a democratic system. So there is some clues. We'll see some changes, especially changes of laws, media laws, some restrictive laws, that is participation of civil societies, for example. Civil societies are expected to expose such kind of gaps.
Yeah.
So a number of restrictive laws were changed after the political reform of Ethiopia in 2018. One change is a media law. This media law will give room for that matter. So we are all starting from the scratch, I can say. Starting from the scratch. So as it is the initial point, it needs some sort of fight, struggle to each other. But still now, it will be difficult to say they are neutral or not. It needs research. It needs continuous assessment. So I can say they are. By the way, personal interest influences the whole system.
Yeah.
It is obvious.
Yeah.
Personal interest. You can evaluate the personal dynamic interests and minds and thinkings of the Prime Minister, how it damages, how it shapes the interest of others. It is obvious. If we have 2, 3 such kind of dynamic individuals, persons in the media too, they will change because there is a room. There is in a short thing which is not clear, but which shows some sort of on-off systems. So to use this or to continue these opportunities, we must have strong individuals even to change from the media or from any part of society.
Good. For election to be democratic, or at least for election to contribute something positive for democratic process, the main political actors need to discharge their responsibility. And here the incumbent government, the ruling party in the incumbent government, Prosperity Party in our case, has great responsibility, I think. So what kind of responsibility you expect from Prosperity Party to discharge?
Okay. A government, as I mentioned, is the winning party, for in our sense, Prosperity Party, has double, triple responsibilities. One, the government should facilitate infrastructures, any kind of infrastructures, which are essential for having democratic election. It will start from budget, finance. The winning party should give or assess whatever internal and external, which are essential expenses for electoral process. It will be even what is materials which are designed by the electoral board. Which are clearly the electoral board has its own plan. Within this plan, electoral board will not have its own finance, which is decided, which will be taken from the government. So, and the security issues, the government was highly responsible to protect the security of political parties and the citizens at large. For that, those democratic institutions should be real democratic institutions. The government should work to have real democratic institutions, including electoral board, free electoral board, free media, free judiciary branch, free policeman, free prosecution processes, and some watchdogs, internal and external watchdogs, and a number of issues or a number of responsibilities were imposed on the government. It is the double responsibility. The government, Prosperity Party, should think over facilitating issues, plus to be a winner for the next election, like that of other political parties. So a number of responsibilities, starting from infrastructures, will be responsibility of the government, especially security issues. Especially in case of security issues, we have millions of internally displaced peoples. These people should have, they have a right to elect their representatives like that of other citizens. For that, the government, the winning party, should facilitate how they can elect their, they are displaced. We'll see a number of displaced people from Tigray, even though the Tigray region is not holding elections next period. In Metakal, for example, in corridors of Oromia and different parts who are internally displaced. These people have full right to elect their representatives, their full right, democratic and human right too. For that matter, the government was responsibility even to think over those internally displaced people, those university students who have a right to elect, that is by fulfilling criteria, and such responsibilities were given for the Prosperity Party.
Okay. What will be the responsibility of the opposition political parties? Because it is a golden opportunity to install a democratic system. What I want to say is, if there is a democratic system, this party can come to power so long as they are competent. So what will be their historical responsibility here?
Political parties, opposition parties, first and foremost, as a group and as an individual, should think democratically, not think, act democratically. That is what we lack from our experience. After thinking, organizing in a democratic manner, their think should be, as I mentioned, they don't think to fight for survival, rather they should compete to serve the people. Bear in mind, if they have no such in mind, their mind, their intention, they can't achieve. Nobody can win if they don't think. Whatever winning party, whatever the opposition parties today. After that, they must freely discuss within their councils. First, these political parties should agree with each other because they are upcoming leaders. They are competing to lead the state of Ethiopia, a huge state with more than 100 million people. Ethiopia is historically, in the public, in democratic, in geographically, in different ways, a huge state in the Horn of Africa. They must, first and foremost, they must agree within their council. Being opposition party doesn't mean that they are unique. They have no any kind of attachment with other parties or other individuals. They will not be. That's the main problem that we see from our political parties. And they must be positive towards being ruled by the law. Any law cannot be absolutely accepted by all. In democracy, majority rule should be there. Majority rule means majority's decisions will prevail and minority rights will be respected, because minorities votes, minorities decisions today will be majority tomorrow if they have valuable ideas. So they must give priority for majority rule. They must rule by the majority decisions and respect minority decisions. Next, they must think over vulnerable groups. Vulnerable groups means women, disabled, aged, displaced peoples, and others. They must, within their policy and strategies, within each and everyday activities, they must think, because they are working to initiate, to convince the people to elect them. So they must do that. And they are also, they should give value for the electorate. That means the governed. That means they must think and give value for the history of it as a state. That is, the history of the state is history of the electorate. Their culture, their religion, their values, beliefs, and interests. They must try to accommodate this diversity, because Ethiopia is a very diverse state. We have diverse cultures, we have diverse religions, interests, values, and so on. They must give value for such kind of diverse interests, and being as we are multi-ethnic groups. And they are expected to be clear way of competition. Clear way of competition. Most of the time, our political parties, their expectation was, if they can't win in an open room, they try to initiate some targets or agendas for others. Maybe, for example, one political party will raise some non-evidence, non-logical ideas to initiate people behind them. So they must have clear competition systems, and they must clearly act within the people and be to the interests of the people. And they must have clear policies, strategies, or platforms, what they are promising to do for the future, to lead or to have some stages up in peace, security, and development. The state, we are poor, we have no democratic culture, we lack peace, we are seeing which is boring in the world, inhuman issues, mass killings, mass destructions, even ethnic system cleansings we are seeing in the state. So they must work strongly to solve such problems, and they work after they have power. But what they want to do if they win election should be clearly addressed by political parties for the public. And then within this, they must initiate in a democratic manner the electorate or the government by having loyal informations. Political parties are expected to give loyal critiques over the government. One responsibility of political parties was giving loyal critiques over the government. That means which are evidenceful, which are logical, systemic, and in which we can cross-check at the ground level. Unless otherwise, because they are expected to expose gaps of the government, the winning party. When they try to expose gaps of the government, they should give loyal critiques within evidence, within logical system. This is what is expected from the political parties. And they have take care of basic values of the people or the society. The basic values in a sense, maybe about diversity, maybe about religion, maybe about the context. And their policies and strategies should take into consideration of national and international context. In globalization period, any state can't stand solely by itself. There must be some sort of communication with an external. So international level, they must take in the scope of globalization, and they should take. What we lack is also, we are weak in diplomacy. We are weak in diplomacy. That is why we can't go within the international system. Whatever we like or not, we must take into consideration of the international context, the international dynamics, international experience, and the national. We must change this international dynamics and context within the national context. They should think within that way. And they should have candidates from vulnerable groups, from minorities, vulnerable groups, females, disabled, from minorities, ethnic minorities, and from each section of the society, because they have full right as human beings. And they should act democratically. And primarily, what Ethiopian people need from political parties in the next is that majority of Ethiopians need unity, oneness, rather than, because there is some sort of fear of disintegration in Ethiopia. There are groups who fear Ethiopia will disintegrate, but I don't think that.
Yeah.
To solve this, we can take a lesson from Yugoslavia, a great state of Yugoslavia, because of such ethnic tensions and disagreements, disintegrate into different parts. But we got a simple groups which are poor, which are backward, and which are still in problem. So oneness will lead us for peace, security, and development rather than disintegration. So political parties are expected to give individual rights and group rights to change or to go towards the peace, security, and development. And such a number of responsibilities will be there because we are from the scratch.
Good. You have been talking about ethno-nationalist party earlier in the interview. And from your spirit, I can understand that you have some frustration regarding ethno-nationalist movement. Do you think ethno-nationalist parties are the problems for upcoming election?
Most of the time,
yeah,
ethno-nationalist states are not fruitful. To exercise ethnic federalism by itself, there must be a very perfect democracy. Without democracy, exercising this ethnic nationalism or ethno-nationalist systems, which gives equal value for all, will be difficult. It has its own defeats. It doesn't mean that it doesn't work. I am not saying that.
Yeah.
But in the Ethiopian context, as we have no democratic culture, as we have no some sort of political culture, we have no free discourses about our issues. If they strictly accept some ethnic groups, stand only whatever the case for their groups and ignore other groups, it's still difficult. For example, that is why we see a number of some ethnic minorities are excluded from different parties.
Yeah.
Almost all Ethiopian regional constitutions give sovereign power for the dominant party, for example. Almost all. Amhara National Regional Constitution says the sovereign power resides on the peoples which are residing in the region.
The region.
Only that. When you go to the Oromia region, the sovereign power holds on the Oromia people. In Benshangul, indigenous and non-indigenous groups were dichotomized, and sovereign power holders are indigenous peoples. But those around 52%, which are discriminated or dichotomized by the constitution as non-indigenous, have no political power. And all regions, all regional constitutions give sovereign political power for the dominant ethnic groups. Even the federal constitution puts 5 regional states as supporters, what means that agar, which are at the end of within the reform, they become full participants before political reform. These 5 regional governments or representatives of these regions cannot be prime minister, cannot be speakerman, vice speakerman, cannot be a member of the executive committee, the highest executive committee, and so which is not expected within this 21st century. For that matter, we have a lot of challenge to jump towards democracy within a single term, or term of office. So that is my fear, to think over how we manage this diversity by having ethno-nationalist political parties.
Okay. Mulunesh Desi, PhD candidate in the field of political science at the University of Bahar Dar, thank you for your time and thank you for your critical insights. I do hope so that your ideas are valuable.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah.
We expect Ethiopians and political parties. The rest part of the world is working planning 200 years for the future, but we are fighting. We are 200 years back about our past history, so we must refresh our mind. Thank you.
Dear viewers, that brings us to the end of our program for today. And the upcoming 2021 Ethiopian Parliamentary Election is something that we should wisely, collaboratively, and democratically manage so that we can lay a fertile ground for the future stability, democracy, and prosperity of our nation. Many thanks for watching and see you next time.